Hi, my name is Shirley Jimenez, and I'm going to talk about some of the events leading up to the American Civil War. On the 150th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's assassination, the American Council of Trustees and Alumni released a survey revealing that only half the American population could correctly identify when the Civil War took place, and just 18% knew that the Emancipation Proclamation meant that slaves were free in areas still in rebellion. The American Civil War from 1861 to 1865 was a civil war within the United States against the Union, the North, and the South, the Confederates. The war's origin initially revolved around saving the Union. However, it resulted in the fight to end slavery as well. According to Virginia Historical Society, ending slavery was the only way to win the war and not have to fight again. I think it is important to make sure the population does not forget significant events in our history that have shaped our nation today. There are several events between the 1850s and 60s that increased sectional tension and ultimately led up to the American Civil War, including Bleeding Kansas, John Brown's raid, and significantly, the election of President Abraham Lincoln. I'm going to start off discussing Bleeding Kansas. The Nebraska-Kansas Act passed in 1954. It was the act that formed two territories, and it allowed Kansas and Nebraska to choose for themselves whether they wanted to be free or slave states. They got to decide through popular sovereignty. The president at the time, James Buchanan, was in favor of slavery. The Lipton Constitution was created, allowing Kansas to become a slave state. So pro-slavery, supported by President Buchanan, attempted to push this constitution through Congress. However, there was enough opposition that it was sent back to Kansas for a vote. Statehood was delayed, and Kansas voters rejected the Constitution, allowing Kansas to become a free state and join the Union. Both sides had resorted to fraud and violence, but it was clear Kansas was for anti-slavery. Since Kansas had become a state of violence as pro- and anti-slavery forces fought over the nation's future, the mass violence caused Kansas to be nicknamed Bleeding Kansas. Next, I will discuss John Brown's raid. John Brown was an abolitionist involved in anti-slavery violence in Kansas. October 16, 1859, he led a raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Brown wanted to start a slave uprising. He and his men together planned a route to Harper's Ferry. On their way there, they captured and held citizens hostage in hopes that they would join his revolt. However, none of them did. They seized Harper's Ferry, which was a federal armory and arsenal. Through their raid success, they thought that they could take the weapons and supply them to slaves and freedom fighters throughout the country. However, word got back to President Buchanan. He sent Marines commanded by Robert E. Lee to stop the problems. Brown took refuge inside the arsenal's engine house. However, when Lee showed up, Brown and his men were surrounded and eventually killed or captured by troops. Brown was captured, tried, and hanged for treason, insurrection, and murder. This event added to the growing abolitionist movement. Lastly, I will discuss the significance of Lincoln's presidency. Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860 as the first Republican president. South Carolina officially issued its Declaration of Causes of Secession. Although before Lincoln was president, 7 states had already seceded from the Union and formed a new nation, the Confederate States of America. They believed that Lincoln was strong in anti-slavery and in favor of Union interests. The incoming Lincoln administration and many Northern people refused to recognize the legitimacy of the secession. Lincoln felt that it was his duty as president to preserve the Union no matter what. He wanted both parts of the country to come together again. He tried to get the rebellious states, including the 7 that had already seceded, to rejoin the Union through his first inaugural address. However, that attempt failed. It ended up leading the Confederates to attack at Fort Sumter, initiating the Civil War. After a long-fought war and multiple battles between the Confederacy and the Union, April 9, 1865, Confederacy General Robert E. Lee finally surrenders to Union General Ulysses S. Grant. Ultimately, their surrender at the Battle of Appomattox marked the end of the Civil War. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln had released an Emancipation Proclamation declaring all slaves to be free. However, it wasn't really until the end of the Civil War that slavery was officially abolished and the 13th Amendment making slavery illegal was passed. I have discussed three main events that initiated the Civil War. the Nebraska-Kansas Act, John Brown's Raid, and the presidency of Abraham Lincoln, which eventually brought the Union back together and abolished slavery. The American Council of Trustees and Alumni President Anne Neal exclaimed that the level of historical illiteracy in this country is alarming, so I wanted to refresh my audience's memory on an important event in our nation's history. Thank you.